Hi, and thanks for joining me with part 3 of the Kismet Poncho crochet pattern. In the last video, part 2, we finished up this 12 round crochet square, and we're going to learn how to join those squares in this video to make this adult size poncho. Now you can go ahead and do the joins on these squares as you are working them, or you can make all 4 of the necessary squares and join them after you're done with all of them if you prefer. Doesn't really matter. If you are going to join as you go, you can leave the last join of round 12 as a half double crochet join, which leaves your hook positioned in that center space. Either way, you're going to want your hook in that center space of the last corner that we worked to begin the joining round. And I'm going to explain the joining round here in more detail before we get into it. And I want to give the basic layout of these squares and how they're put together to make this big poncho. So here's our square. We've got one side along the top here, and the squares are joined by the sides. As you can see, here's my first square. I've got a second square joined at the side. Here's one. There's 2 squares. They're joined in the side here with this double crochet join, and then a third square. They're all in a straight line, all joined at the side with this double crochet seam. Now when you look at this seam, it does look like 2 rows, and technically it is, but they're just worked simultaneously. So you hold the 2 squares together and double crochet back and forth on the available chain spaces. So the squares are held together like this with the 2 sides side by side, and you just work across that top of the crochet. You work 3 squares joined in a straight line, as I mentioned. That 4th square goes on top, there we go, of the end square of the line. So it makes this kind of L shape. And the 4th square is that short line of the L. So here's the diagram that I threw together for this. The green lines are where the joins occur. They're regular joins. The pink line represents one join, and it's where you fold this poncho over and make the final join to complete the circle and make it a garment rather than just squares in an L shape. So there's 4 total joins. And then we have 1 square on top and 3 across in a straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the join for you. Again, you can make all 4 squares before doing the joins, or if you make 1 square and then make your second square and decide to go ahead and join those 2 squares, you can do that kind of joining as you go as well. I made all 4 of my squares and then joined them because I wasn't sure where I was going to want all my colors. So here we go. We're going to start the join by holding any 2 squares with wrong sides facing each other. So the wrong sides are pointed inward. The right sides are facing outward on either side, and you've got the 2 round 12 sides aligned, and your hook is already at the corner space of your front square. After chaining 3 for our first double crochet, we'll move to the square behind the front square and work 1 double crochet in that corner space. So we're only working in 1 square at a time, but we're working back and forth between squares. So the next double crochet will go in the next chain space of the front square. Double crochet in that chain space, and then the next double crochet will be in the next free space on the back square. So we'll double crochet in that. And then the next double crochet is in the next chain space on the front square. And then double crochet in the next chain space on the back square. And then double crochet in the next chain space on the front. So we're just double crocheting back and forth, first the front, which is where we started with our chains, then the back, so a double crochet in the back corner, and then a double crochet alternating between squares in every chain space across both squares. There's no chaining in between double crochet, just double crochet across. So here we go, you can see me alternate. There's the front, next one on the back, next one on the front, next one on the back, and you're going to repeat that 33 times or as many times as you need to get to the end, which is the corner space on the opposite side of both squares. And I'll stretch this seam out so you can see the double crochets on either side stretched out look a bit like 2 rows, but we are working it as 1 row. And I'm just going to continue across the entire side until I reach the corner spaces. And once I reach the corner spaces, I'm going to work a double crochet into each of those middle spaces on the corner of each square. And then once I've finished with that, that's a completed seam on one side. So you're going to imitate that seam in the configuration that we showed before. So that's the 3 squares in a row with the 1 square on top completing the L shape. And when you've completed your L shape, the final seam is made by folding this piece back around and meeting that edge of that 2 edges. And we're going to complete that circular join there. So it's just 1 regular join. I'll zoom out so you can see. We've just taken our L and folded it over to meet the 2 squares where the pink line was on the diagram. So the pink line represents where those 2 squares are supposed to meet. Here I am kind of showing you that big L folds over. As we see, one side folds down and then the short side folds over in half. And then the seam is made along that last side that remains unjoined. So we're going to go ahead and make that seam here. We're going to grab our squares so that the right sides are facing outward with that edge aligned, and join our yarn at the corner space, chaining 3 for our first double crochet. Find the corner space on the square behind it and work a double crochet. Double crochet in the next space on the front square, double crochet in the next space on the back square. And we do the exact same kind of seam we just did across that line to finish up the body of the poncho. And here's my completed seam. Just going to mess around with this here and try and align it on screen. I've ended up with my seam going toward the collar of the poncho. And it's really hard to see on camera here because it's zoomed in, but the collar of the poncho at the top is where I've ended my seam here, so I'm ready to go right on out to start the collar portion. And I'm going to do that by traveling around this seam. These two seams meet at the top here. And I'm going to work my first few stitches across the tops of those seams. And if you worked your joining seam in this direction, that's fine. If you didn't, you can always just cut yarn, tie off, and go rejoin your yarn at the point that we're talking about. But we're going to start by chaining 2 and then working 1 double crochet with the last loop on the hook in each of the next, in the sides of each of the next 3 double crochets from the seams. So we're just working under the sides of the double crochets, almost as if it were a chain loop, and drawing up a double crochet and working it until the last loop is left on the hook. And the chain 2s counts as your first double crochet with last loop on. So to continue, we're going to chain 1 and skip over to the next empty chain 1 space and just double crochet, chain 1 in each chain 1 space across the collar. As it becomes bigger, I'm struggling more to keep everything on the table, as you can see. But here you can see we've reached the next pair of seams. So this is at the opposite corner of the collar. And we're going to treat that the same way, working a double crochet decrease across the sides of those 4 double crochets from the seam. So we'll just yarn over and double crochet in the side of the next double crochet, leaving last loop on a hook. Do the same thing in the next double crochet. Skip over to the side of the next seam where the next double crochet is, and same thing into the side of that. Double crochet with last loop on the hook. More struggling, sorry. Okay, and finally double crochet with the last loop on the hook for the 4th time. So we have 4 of those on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all those loops and chain 1. And we'll just continue doing double crochet chain 1s across the rest of the collar until reaching the beginning of the round. One of the things I really enjoyed about this piece was how many colors I can imagine doing it in. It's easy to change color and it's easy to modify, and I really hope this project is something some people can put their own kind of spin on it, in their own colors, maybe try it in different yarn weights, or I don't know. I like to do a lot of variations in my projects. So I like to design projects that are easy to do variations of. Hopefully I do that. We'll see. All right, we've made it to the collar end here, so we're going to slip stitch in the initial double crochet together decrease that we did. So that's the top of those 3 double crochets together plus the chain 2 that counted as the initial. And you can do this join with a chain 1 and slip stitch, or you can replace the last chain 1 with a half double if you are not changing yarns. But I am going to change yarns, so I'm slip stitching and cutting and tying off so I can change over to that nice coral colored yarn that's down there. That one is Caron Simply Soft. That coral yarn is actually called Persimmon. I think it looks more like coral. Beats me. I don't know. I don't name these things. How do you get a yarn color naming job? I want that job. Okay, round 2 of the collar, I kind of skipped over it. Sorry about that. It's just double crochet in each space. Chain 3 to start, which counts as your first. Double crochet in each space around the entire collar and join with a slip stitch. It's a super easy round, as are the next several rounds. Here I am joining. And my next round is going to be the same color, so I'm just going to keep going here with this persimmon yarn. So I'm going to chain 3, and then this is actually double crochet in every other stitch. So we are halving the number of stitches in the round because this collar is still super wide. I need to tighten it a lot more. And the final round for the collar is also very simple. We start the round by chaining 1 and single crocheting in each stitch around, and that's it. Just crochet in every stitch and then slip stitch in the first single crochet to join. Here I'm laying out the completed collar so you can kind of see all the rows we just worked. I did go through that pretty fast because it's pretty easy, but here's the completed collar with the final round of single crochets along the edge there. I like that round. It helps keep the collar tight, and it puts a nice thick border on the collar around your neck. So now that the collar is completed, we have one last round to go before we finish this whole beast of a poncho. And that's the border round on the bottom, which you can skip. It's perfectly fine if you're running out of yarn or it's already big enough or you just don't want to. So we'll do that by joining our yarn in any chain 1 space. Again, I work into the same spaces as the seams. You could skip those, it doesn't really matter. Won't show really either way. Chain 4 to begin, which counts as the first double crochet plus chain 1, and then in every chain 1 space around you'll work 1 double crochet and chain 1. So here I go, 1 double crochet, chain 1, move to the next chain space, double crochet, chain 1, next chain space, all the way around the entire bottom of the poncho. Now the bottom of the poncho does have some points, corners, And then the edges do have some seams. We're going to move over the seams in the same way we did for the collar, which is to just work our stitches one in the side of each double crochet for the seam. And I'll show you that when we get around to it. But for now, I'm just working one double crochet, chain one in every chain space around. Here I'm at my corner space, and I've got the instructions for the corners on the screen down in the subtitles. So in the corner space, just as if we were working a regular square, we're going to make an increase at the corner. And to do that, we will work one double crochet, chain one 4 times into a single space. So 4 double crochets with 4 chain spaces in between. And once we've turned that corner, just gonna half double and chain one in each space, continuing on along the bottom edge of the poncho. And now I'm going to reach a seam here, and I'm going to work 1 double crochet, chain 1 into the side of the double crochets, the 2 double crochets that make up that seam, before continuing on with the double crochet, chain 1 in every chain space. And once you've worked that strategy all along the bottom of the poncho, you can slip stitch in the 3rd chain of the beginning chain and cut your yarn and tie off. For the fringe, I've got a 6-inch book. This is my notebook for 6 years of my business, which is a fun little, I'm gonna flip through it for fun. Some of this stuff is so old, but some of it's a lot more recent. Oh look, there's the elf coat and a sweater I never made a pattern for. So anyway, I have my book. This is my traditional fringe making book. All of my fringe is the length of this book. Okay, so I'm gonna just start my fringe, and I'm gonna take my yarn and I'm going to wrap it around the short edge of this book really fast into a big bundle. And once I've got my yarn wrapped, I'll cut it off and then insert my scissors. I like a book because it has that hard edge that I can slip the scissors under and cut down one side so that I have these 6-inch long strands. And I want multicolor fringe, so I'm going to do this with the accent color as well. Smaller bundle this time. So I'm going to take my strands and loop them through the chain 1 spaces of the bottom. I used 4 strands and I doubled them over. I think I typically did 3 beige or gold here, and then I added a persimmon colored one for a little bit of color. Once I've got my bundle, I double them over my finger and slip my get my hook slipped under the chain space on the bottom of the poncho so that I can catch my doubled end and draw that through, and then draw the yarn tails through, and repeat that for every other space of the bottom of the poncho. And when you are finished with the fringe, you can weave in all of your ends and you have a completed Kismet poncho. I really hope you loved making this morale fiber design, and if you want to see more designs from me, I would love it if you would check out my blog, check out my Facebook page, and if you want to share projects you've made from my designs, we do have a pretty awesome crochet group going on Facebook, and I will include that link in the description below the video. And here on screen is a link to my blog. Leave me a comment, leave me some feedback, get a hold of me. I love to talk shop, so I hope to hear from you, and don't forget to like and subscribe.